say a little bit about yourself?
Cool. So I think we'll see people trickling in. So it might be a bit of we'll be letting people in and they'll be joining as we go, but well done for kind of getting here on time. And yeah, just thank you to Toby for having me. So I work for the Directory of Social Change. My name's George Knight. And at the Directory of Social Change, I train a lot of different topics, but fundraising is what I primarily train. I'm just going to let this gentleman in as we go. So fundraising is where I spend a lot of my time, and actually corporate fundraising is an area where I deliver some quite unique training because my background isn't actually in the charity sector, but I have been in the sector for 5 years. But my background before then, I worked in the FTSE 100. I worked as in sales for Travis Perkins with teams responsible for £36 million turnover. And there was a lot of conversations, and the way we would hold those conversations in that area that actually, not necessarily the outcomes, but the way that you apply yourself to dealing with corporates and to negotiating with corporates is very similar. So I've tried to bring a lot of that experience to my fundraising perspective. So in terms of fundraising, as I say, I work for the Directory of Social Change. I don't fundraise for the Directory of Social Change. So we're a charity that pretty much finances itself as a business would, in the terms that we provide services that people pay for. So we're quite unique in the charity sector, and that allows us to have quite a good voice. So we're doing some Nevermore funding campaigns at the moment, something that maybe we wouldn't be able to do if we were funded by grants and etc. However, I am a fundraiser as a volunteer. So a lot of my stories today, I'll be talking about a garden in Hackney, or Hoxton more specifically, called St Mary's Secret Garden, where I'm the company secretary and I volunteer as a fundraiser there as well. And we have not necessarily any big corporate partnerships, but some really small types of relationships, which I'll mention later. And I think maybe the size of the organizations here today, that might be, those sorts of stories might be a little bit more beneficial than maybe chasing the big FTSE 100, FTSE 250 organizations that, of course, are great partnerships to have, but might be something they might have slightly wider goals, slightly more national goals, and some slightly smaller charities may have. And we'll talk about that later. And we'll also talk about what it means to just be a fundraiser, what you're responsible for as a fundraiser. And I'll give a little bit of an oversight of some grant giving charities as well, just to show you why companies are different and why we look to get funded for companies. Toby, I'm going to click admit on this one, but are you happy just to let more people in as they come?
Yes, sure. George, I was wondering, normally we do very quick introductions, but we've got so many people, which is great. So I think we'll just cut to it.
I was going to suggest exactly that. Once I'll share my screen and I'll get some slides up, and I'll go in and out of sharing screen, and I might use PowerPoint for the majority, but we may have the opportunity to look at some actual documents in Word and Excel as well. So if I bring my screen up, I would normally have a little spiel here that says, welcome yourself in the chat, introduce yourself, give your name, as well as the organization that you're representing. So if everyone could start to do that now, it'd be really nice for other people to see who's attending. I mean, obviously I've seen the list, but it's great for everybody to be able to see who's here. Because as much as I'm the trainer, there'll be a lot of great information just in this room as well, without me kind of being here. So just introduce yourself and you'll have a bearing of who's in the room. And I'll put up some little rules as well. And I say they're rules, but it's all kind of common sense, isn't it? It's a little bit different on Zoom. And I mean, it's taken me, it's been a different situation, isn't it? Training on Zoom and being trained by Zoom as well. It's not quite as easy as face-to-face. And it's my challenge to make sure that I can kind of meet those learning objectives over this format as I would have been able to do face-to-face. So here's some stuff. I mean, if you have video, please keep your video on. It allows me to see your faces, which it sounds silly, but that does help me to understand if people are engaged and if they're paying attention. Of course, if you don't want to pay attention, you're more than welcome to turn your video off. And
please don't be shy, but we love to see you if you would like to put your camera on.
Exactly. So I think what we'll do first, and we'll get the feel for it today. Sometimes I have groups where people shout out and they kind of butt in, and that's really good. Sometimes there's a little bit too much of that and we have to sort of manage it a little bit better. I think from this perspective, at the moment, there's not too many of us. So maybe we'll do a little shout out and jump in if you're confident. I'm going to go to the last slide on here and we're going to write down some learning objectives. So for me personally, these are the key takeaways. I want to look at the characteristics of a fundraiser. I want to give you some tools that before you start calling people, before you start even prospecting in the first place, what are the corporate partners that you might be ending up partnering with? What do they want you to see? What information do you need before you even pick up that phone? And then of course, how do we actually ask for the partnership? What's the language we can use? What are some questions we can use there? And then what will the partners want to see from us? I mean, as the donor to Friends of the Earth, I give £3 a month. They never thank me for that. They've never once thanked me for that. And it always makes me question, do they want my money really? If it was really that important for them, would they be thanking me? with our partners, our corporate partners, they don't exist to give us money. And so for them, that communication is even more important than it would be with a grant giver. And so we'll look at how you can communicate objectively, how you can kind of give them financial benefits for being involved in a partnership with you. So learning objectives, who has come here today to learn something specifically, and what is it? Please shout out. You won't be judged for shouting out.
Those key objectives look really good to me. Thank you. I'm excited for the session.
Me too.
One of the sort of more specific things that I'm wondering around is about how to know what's the right amount to be aiming for. Because obviously don't want to kind of go in really low and could have got more, but also don't want to take advantage or be seen to be sort of greedy and everything like that. Particularly as a charity, it's sort of, that's never the impression you want to give. You want to kind of sell it for the right reason.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
You also don't want to be in a position where you think you're asking for too much. So when they say, you instantly going down, because you want to be able to hold that first position because you're confident.
Exactly. It's like a sales negotiation, right? But
it is
wanting
a sales
to pitch
negotiation.
it properly. Yeah,
it really is. And that's what they're used to. That's what, even if it's kind of a different dynamic to a sales environment, that's what they're used to. That's what these corporate partners are used to. And unless they've got a specific team, which some of the bigger ones do, which operate more like grant giving charities, most of the smaller companies, they think like that. So we have to think like that too. That's a really good question. What is the right amount? Who else has got any learning objectives they want from today? And we'll come back to this at the end, so please grill me now.
Hiya, I'm Sharanjit Bala from Sunshine of Hounslow.
Hi,
We
Sharanjit.
are a small community group organization. We are not registered, but we are constituted. So I don't know nothing about this fundraising. So for me, I will really enjoy to learn every bit of it.
Cool. Overview and general corporate fundraising. Perfect.
Yeah. Hi, George. I'm Anne Fowles, and I'm from London Pulse Basketball. And we've had, the last 3 or 4 years, we've had quite a lot of funding from big city investment organization. And that's kind of drying up now. But something I'd like to get from today is some more ideas about other types of company that we could maybe approach. So rather than a multinational city-based organization, are there maybe more local companies who might be interested and willing in developing a relationship with us? Because we're very much Ealing based, and fundraising wise, that's not something that we take advantage of at the moment. So I'd like to know about smaller organizations, and maybe what's different about dealing with them as opposed to dealing with a multi-million-pound
Agreed.
organization.
I think if you're working backwards from those big discussions and you're coming down to the smaller ones, you're in a great place. You've definitely done that the hard way round, because the bigger ones, they do take a lot longer. The relationships are a lot tougher to build. And I think the smaller organizations I've had a lot of luck with. I mean, I was saying I was going to talk about the garden today, which of course I will. We're funded by the worshipful company of glovers. They don't give us any money. They give us gardening gloves. It's the best relationship we could ever have for that sort of situation. We never have to buy gloves ever. And I mean, in terms of how much that costs us, I'm not even sure. This relationship's been going on for 3 or 4 years now. And so in terms of calling small organizations in your area, we'll talk about that today, and we'll talk about where you can find them. I mean, I might not even be able to answer that question actually. And it might just be a matter for you to call them, to take the tools from today and actually speak to them. They might be really struggling after COVID. They might not have any finances. They might not have enough staff, but there's nothing stopping you from having those conversations. And I'll show you how I personally prospect people in the local area, how I find them, how I find the right person, how I talk to the right person. And then you can take that all the way today and make those conversations yourself. So prospecting smaller companies. Any more? Go on. There must be a few more. Go on. Last person, should we say? Shout out.
Hi, I'm done one try. I can't get my video to work, so sorry
No
about
worries.
that. But I'm
No
from
worries.
Sick Welfare and Research Trust.
Cool.
I just wanted to know how and at what level do you develop relationships with funders, and how do you maintain that, and just generally not to be seen to be going over the board with them, but generally maintaining a good relationship where they know you and you know them.
Perfect. We'll talk about this as well. That's absolutely key. And I mean, if anybody's managed staff, it's the same sort of balance between how many times can you give someone constructive feedback. You have to manage that based on how many positive feedback you've given them. How many times can you ask someone for money? Well, it's all to do with the amount of times you've spoken to them and communicated with them and thanked them already for what they've already done. And there's a little model I use for that, which isn't going to come up as a slide, but I'll definitely talk about it throughout. So that's really cool. I mean, this is great. This is some good stuff. This is, you can see this is right at the end of my PowerPoint. So we'll have to come past this later. So you can judge me on how well I've done against these 4 learning objectives as well. So I'm going to zoom back to the top, and any keen-eyed people may have seen some slides there. But so we've got this stuff. We're working with tech, and we've already done this. So we've already looked at the end. A few people there have given me some suggestions about what they want to see at the end of this training. And I think it's the same for your whole corporate fundraising journey. So someone mentioned about, I don't know how much money to ask. Well, we need to know how to cost these projects. And if we're thinking with the end in mind, we should know what that project looks like completely now. So and we'll cover this, we want to be at a point where before you even start asking for money, you have a list of all the different projects you run, and you have a list of the minimum income you need. I mean, I try and keep a minimum and a maximum. Most of the time, there's just a figure I need to make the project run. And so when I'm negotiating with whoever it is, a grant giver or a corporate, there is just a flat figure. They're either choosing to pay part of that or all of it, but that figure still needs to be met. And so I always like to think with the end in mind. I don't want to be going to somebody with the opportunity for them to fund us and not having a clear guideline in place of what that funding is going to look like. So if anyone's familiar with Stephen Covey, this is one of his habits. Think with the end in mind, really important. So yeah, key takeaways, we looked at these already, didn't we? So what is fundraising? Can anybody give me their opinion on what fundraising is? Really easy. This is really easy.
Raise money.
Yep. So specifically, seeking and gathering voluntary financial contributions, pretty much that. So it's one of the main differences between how we as charities work and how private organizations work. So we're able to fundraise money away from goods and services. So why do we have to do it? Why might we have to fundraise? So we need to fundraise so we can deliver services that have no financial transaction. There is not a financial cost for helping some of the beneficiaries that we help. Of course, some charities deliver services. DSC are one of those charities, but the majority of services that charities deliver have no financial transaction. So we have to fundraise money as a means of promoting the message and the goals of our charities. I mean, without funds, it simply wouldn't be able to continue. Are there any organisations here that are funded entirely by selling services at the moment and are looking to go into sort of a fundraising model? I think care homes are sometimes in that space. I saw Shanti, was that yourself there? You fundraised, you're not fundraising yet?
We sort of are in that space. So I'm part of Mind and Hammersmith Fulham, Ealing and Hounslow. But my team is a corporate fundraiser, corporate training and consultancy arm of it around workplace wellbeing. And so therefore I've been given the increased brief of also corporate fundraising.
Fine.
So it sort of changes it where we were selling a service and we were being paid for that service. We're now trying to increase that out and use our relationships for that as well.
And I think we're seeing that a lot actually, and as organisations are becoming more pressed for funding, as government services are giving some reduced funding, there are organisations that primarily relied on selling services that are having to look to fundraise nowadays, and certain things that may have been delivered for a cost in the past. So we're in a bit of a minefield, and there's a lot more people coming to this space. And actually, corporates do stand separate from grant-giving charities, which, if I were to say that grant-giving charities are feeling a lot of pressure at the moment, that's definitely true. There's been a lot of money given out this year that maybe wouldn't have been given out if it wasn't due to COVID. And so the organisations that are having to pick up that shortfall are maybe struggling to meet that demand in some ways. And companies are in a slightly different boat. So here today, we're going to have a completely different pot of money that not many charities are actually are actually fighting for at the moment. And I think it's really smart from Ealing and Hounslow CBS to put this on for their members and for individuals and charities to attend this, because it's a different way of working. So why do we fundraise? We fundraise to make money for services that we cannot sell. And really, it's for our beneficiaries. So I did this session for the Wildlife Trust, and they informed me that there probably wouldn't be many people as their beneficiaries, and the majority of them are animals, actually. But for the majority of charities, these are the beneficiaries that we're working for, and these are the individuals. I mean, our motto at DSC is helping you to help others. It's really easy, and it's really fun for me to sit here for 2 hours and speak about corporate fundraising, because it's what I love. But the hard part is for you to go and take this learning away and go and help the individuals and beneficiaries that are either members or beneficiaries of your charity. So really, as I say, I've got the fun part now, but the real job is for you to take this information away and help deliver change for your beneficiaries. So I'm going to show, today somebody has to ask somebody for money. So I'm just going to show some charities on the screen. I'm going to show some corporates as well. Does anybody know what the 5 corporates on the right have in common? So each one of these 5 organizations, they have their own charitable foundation. So they all give to charities through an organized grant giving charitable body. So for example, the Greggs Foundation, Chelsea Foundation, all these 5 organizations give money through separate charitable arms. So whereas in this case, we're mainly talking about speaking directly to companies, you might find with some of the bigger ones, and I imagine some people here will already know this, some of the bigger ones, you're actually going to be speaking to a charitable organization. It's funded by the big company, the big FTSE 100 or whatever it may be, but you're applying to a grant giver. So it's slightly different and slightly more straightforward. They're more organized to give money. The charitable foundations are designed to give money. Whereas what we're talking about in this training predominantly is talking to organizations that do not have organized giving. So organizations that do not exist to give money. Because if you wanted to go to Greggs, you wouldn't call Greggs head office, you'd call the charitable foundation head office, and they would have a more clear application stage for you to apply for them financially. Cool. So any downsides to fundraising? What's a bad thing about fundraising?
I don't know.
There must be some downsides.
It's time consuming.
It is, yeah.
And it, it takes away from the operational work of providing the service.
Mm-hmm.
And who to approach.
Yeah, and I think it's become a specialist area.
Agreed. I mean, when I moved into the charity sector, I didn't even know fundraising was a job all those years ago, and now it's only just become a qualification at university. So one of our trainers, actually Katie Rabone, she's just put into place a qualification at Kent University, I think it is. We can now train to be a fundraiser. I mean, imagine at a university, you can actually train to be a fundraiser now. People go to university to be fundraisers, which is quite important as it's a pretty busy job in the sector. But there are other downsides as well. I mean, you're controlled by the grant giver. So what we'll see is that there's an ethical conversation to be had when you're looking at being funded by companies. I mean, there's obvious ones. If you're cancer research, please don't take any money from Marlborough. You're not going to be very smart to be funded by a tobacco organization. But just charities in general, we do have to be on the ball every year. We can't rely on our services that are non-financial to bring us in a certain amount of money. We have to go and fundraise for that every year. So we lack a bit of control. We lack a bit of ownership. We might be having to perform tasks that the organization funding us wants us to deliver. Who knows? It's a little bit less control, and it can be hard to cover core costs as well. So there are some downsides, but this is the nature of delivering services that have no financial cost attributed to them. So we're going to have a little bit of time now looking at what it means to be a fundraiser. I mean, this is a pretty simple task, and so I'm going to take some notes so that when we leave, you can actually take these. I'll send these slides, or Toby will send you these slides, so you'll have the notes of what we've written today. But there are some basic principles, and the basic principles are, for an organization to be a successful fundraiser, it needs to be personable, it needs to be credible. Is anybody in a position, and I mean, this would take some serious honesty, where you may think that there's a credibility issue with your organization right now that may impact any fundraising? No. obviously the fundraising sector is heavily defined by your personability and your credibility. I mean, a good example is the big one recently with Oxfam in Haiti. And the impact that had on them receiving grants from grant-giving charities and from companies actually was pretty major. I mean, big grant-giving charities had to pull their funding due to what happened with the gentleman in Haiti and that awful situation where they were mismanaging charitable funds. The end goal wasn't actually that they lost money, as they were able to speak to their major donors and resolve a situation there, but they lost a lot of credibility, and that's going to have an impact on not just their fundraising, but actually the entire charitable sector. Saw a knock from that. So you must be credible, you must be personable, and we must ask for money. We must communicate. So if we get time, there's a really good video, which we'll have a link to if we don't get to watch it in this session. But there's a really good American TED Talk, and we watched the last few minutes if we get the chance, where she talks about how she asks people for money. And the Americans are so much better than this, than the Brits are. I mean, we pussyfoot around the question and we get a little bit scared of the question. But asking for money is a massive step. And then, of course, communicating afterwards. It's all well and good asking for money, but if you don't then communicate, why would they give you money again? So these are basic principles. But there are some more that go along with us. And what we want to do is we want to build up that trust. We want the companies that we work with to trust us. So these are some behaviors that individual fundraisers have to live by: personable, credible, enthusiastic, persuasive, networker, and creative. So I'm just going to quickly note down some words, and please shout out. And if you haven't shouted anything out so far, I may pick on you by name. So take the opportunity to shout out some of these easier answers before we get to some of the tougher questions later. So if you were to be personable as a fundraiser, what might you be doing? What activities might you actually deliver, or might you actually do that would make you more personable as a fundraiser? I'm not expecting miracles from this. I'm thinking honesty. A personable fundraiser.
Can I go first?
What was that? Sorry, Shanji?
Yeah. Can we? I mean, I would do some garden training for to fundraise for other charities. You know, so or give some of my yoga classes for fundraising as well.
So that's you.
I don't know if I'm saying the right for answers or not.
No, that sounds really nice. Delivering yoga sessions for your charity. That sounds really good way of reaching new beneficiaries.
Yeah.
How else could you be personable?
Yeah.
For us, lived experience is a big thing within mental health. So sharing that and how the charity has sort of supported that.
That's been one of the best moves, I think, in terms of mental health, and the way that's been spoken about is actually looking for that experience and looking for those individuals that have been through this and not necessarily suffered or had issues, but have had experiences. I love that, and that's a big passion of mine, Alice, actually. Great. Anything else? How else could you be personable? Go on.
Maybe give a counseling on phone and then ask for donation.
Phone counseling.
Is that?
I like that. Great. How could you? So these are quite similar. How could you be credible? I mean, I've not seen Ibrahim say anything yet. Joy, Jamie, Jessica, what are you thinking? How could you be credible? What actions would you do as a fundraiser to be credible? Someone's going to be hating that I've just shouted their name out, aren't they?
I'll give it a go. This is Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a little one who might need me at any point. So please.
Absolutely fine, mate. That's lovely.
Yeah. But to be credible, I think, like for me, like I'm on the trustee of London Pulse as well with Anne, and I think I've personally done some of the fundraising stuff as well. So like done half marathons and stuff like that, and I think the actions of that show your genuine passion for the work.
Definitely.
So yeah, and yeah, being a volunteer coach as well. At the club, I'm very close to why I believe in this. So yeah,
I love that. That's really good. Anything else?
Yeah. Hi, it's Jess. I think for us and for me, it's posting some of the things that we've done within the organization on LinkedIn to show this is what we've done to help young people, and these are the actions and steps that we've taken.
How do you find, how much kind of return do you get from that? Do you find people engage with those stories?
Yeah, I mean, it depends really on the type of activity. We get a lot more when it's specifically about the young people with photos or videos of their either music or poetry. A little bit less when it's just text. So really it's video and photos that we receive the most response from.
I love that. Yeah. And actually your social followings can have an impact on your ability to raise funds from corporate organizations if what they're desiring is sort of brand engagement and for you to kind of shepherd their brand into a kind of a better light. So yeah, I mean, using your following like that on social media is really positive. And I think those sorts of stories, I know from personal experience, I watch those in my free time. So I love stuff like that. And I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Great. So these are some objective ideas, how to be personable, how to be credible, really good. So we'll blitz through these ones as well. Enthusiastic. How do we be enthusiastic? What could we do? We'll only get a couple on each one just because we'll keep on top of time. What does an enthusiastic fundraiser do? So I'm
Give us an example, please. Don't have a clue.
Exactly. So I'm thinking of an enthusiastic fundraiser could be someone that attends different sessions in their network, someone who attends, so online Zoom calls, someone who is able to come up with creative ideas, someone who else what else could an enthusiastic fundraiser do? What about persuasive?
Connection.
Go on. What was that?
Be a connection with the other organisation that you're approaching and think what you could offer them in return.
Love that. Be a connection. Definitely. What about a persuasive fundraiser? I'll give you one here. You're going to have a lot of no's in the corporate game. I mean, when I teach grant giving, when I teach trust fundraising, I like to say that 10 to 15% is a brilliant success rate. It's going to be a little bit lower in the corporate space, I feel. Not only are there a lot more corporates to deal with, so you'll be having a lot more conversations. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more no's to go with that. So dealing with no, tough one, really hard to do. One of the hardest things actually to do. How else could you be persuasive?
Something about demonstrating exactly what the money will achieve, so around outcomes and also kind of specific projects and things like that that it's going to go towards.
Great.
Yeah, I also think it's helpful to be adaptable to what you're asking for. So if you're asking for specific funds, and that's not an option, but being open to whether it's volunteering time or mentorship, and just being open to a variety of
I want to say outcomes. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. And just for the last two, we can come back to them if anybody shouts at any. But so a networker, and I guess I already said one up here, didn't I? So attending sessions within your network. How else we could put? I guess LinkedIn was mentioned earlier, wasn't it? Definitely. Cool. So last one then, creative. This is probably the hardest one, and this is the one where maybe I'm a very objective person, and I like someone to kind of write a book how they do things and how they do it well, and follow through on that and implement it in my own life. So creativity is always one that I kind of am stumped on. And sometimes I get the best solutions here. So for example, there was a corporate fundraiser that we trained last year. In fact, it was a different training course actually. It was grant giving, and she was talking about a corporate partnership she had. And this is the National Lobster Hatchery. And so she creatively came up with a solution to speak to every single Michelin star restaurant in the UK that sold lobsters, and then ask them if they'll put an opt-out £1 donation for every lobster that's sold to go to the people who have purchased it, and see if they would opt out of giving an extra £1 to the National Lobster Hatchery, who are responsible for making sure there are a sustainable lobster source in the UK. I mean, for me, that's one of the most creative solutions ever. And I think if you're buying a £35 lobster from a restaurant, you're probably not going to moan too much about an extra £1 donation to the National Lobster Hatchery. And this was a clever way to reach beneficiaries who maybe didn't even know they were beneficiaries of this charity. So creativity can play a big role in kind of company giving and company fundraising, because as you say, that someone said earlier, you can be a lot more flexible with the outcomes. So how could someone be creative? What's a good way to be creative? This is the last one.
I used to create a fashion dresses for little girls. So then try to sell them with the other events.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we try to grow aloe vera plants, little ones, and then sell them for £1 each to raise money like that.
Cool. So it's just try something, isn't it? Try
so
something.
My own skills, yeah.
Definitely. Try something, test it out. I love that it's going behind my camera screen. Test it out. Great. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple task just to kind of objectify what a fundraiser can be like. Go on, someone got an extra one there? Oh, we're struggling to hear you, Rosina.
Can't hear you.
I was going to say use video content. So it's more an emotional connection when you send information to potential funder.
I love that. Thanks, Toby.
Or Rosina, I don't know whether you want to log in and log out and log in again. Your connection isn't too good, Rosina.
We'll move on. Yeah, Rosina, unfortunately, I did miss that. We can go back though. Cool. So yeah, these are just the ones I've got, and I'll blast through these. As I say, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Finding the why, endorsements, engaging, dealing with the no, and dealing with the no comes up twice because it is a tough thing to do, and you kind of almost have to just own that before it comes along. So you'll have these, generating funder buy-in, or generating partner buy-in in this case. And creative. Cool. So these are the principles again. You must ask, you must communicate, and asking. Adding into the marketing. I think, are there any organizations here that don't have an ask on their website, on the homepage, or at least close to the homepage, a donation button?
I don't have. Put
it on. You never know when someone is going to give you money through that link. I mean, I must say last year we probably got about £20 at the Garden, and just for kind of bigger picture, it's about 120 grand turnover. So we got barely any money through I think 5 people donated less than £10 each. However, that facility is there. It was free to put in. So the ask, and the more places you have to ask, the more opportunity you'll have. And that's a passive ask, from a marketing perspective. Obviously, that's not you going and asking the same person over and over again. During the negotiation, this is what we'll talk about today, how to ask during negotiation. And the most important step, of course, is the ask. In terms of communicating, it will also cover this. So this is how to objectify your reporting process. What do you report back on? What part of the project do you tell them about? When do you tell them it? And of course, asking for referrals. Actually, companies are great to ask for referrals from. They do have a network of suppliers and other organizations within them that tend to almost have similar values as well. If you're working with an organization that picks their suppliers based on values, you're going to have an almost network, like a tree network, straight away ready to go. So this is just to go through some specifics of company fundraising then. So has anybody heard of this CSR? Does it give you a big smile, or does it give you a bit of a frown? How do we feel about CSR? It's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, since the end of the 1800s was when we first saw corporate social responsibility to start to play a role in the UK. And to this day, it hasn't changed much, actually. And it's almost, in the ethical side of things, is more considered. But this is almost the expectation now that companies have to have some form of social responsibility. Is anybody not finding that picture? Is anybody working with companies that aren't that were a struggle to get to that point, or is anybody kind of trying to build relationships with companies that don't feel like they have a social responsibility? I'm just wondering if anyone's had any specific feedback.
It feels a bit token sometimes, and that can be quite difficult in terms of sort of ethics is too strong a word for it. But we're sort of trying to deliver services, but we're also trying to change the world, as it were. And so you sort of want to be able to bring the company along with you, and corporate social responsibility sometimes feels like it distances them from the actual reality of it.
I completely agree. I think you've summed that up really well, actually, and it's definitely important, and some charities and some companies will see it differently. For me, I like to make the conversation less about CSR and more about what project are they going to help you deliver? What beneficiaries are they going to help you serve? Why, if they help you serve these beneficiaries, is that going to be beneficial for them as an organization? And if it's not, why is it going to be beneficial for the wider town around them or the wider city around them? So if it doesn't directly affect their staff or doesn't directly affect their stakeholders, why is it going to be a good relationship to have? So yeah, CSR it's a fancy term, and it's one of the reasons companies give. So these are the biggest giving, the biggest that companies gave. I think this is 2016, 17, I believe. So it's a few years old now. It's a lot of money. I mean, if you compare it to the amount that grant giving charities give, it's not that much. But of course, it's great to see companies like Vodafone here giving 21 million. It's a substantial amount of money, absolutely a sizable sum of money. And then, I mean, companies like Shell, you would expect to be up there. They've got some greenwashing to be doing. So how do companies give? What types of relationship can you have with a company? This one is challenging, and this one I won't give any hints for. There's an obvious one. What can you get from companies?
Time as well as money.
Time as well as money, definitely. But the first one, cash. What else can companies give us? Time is a good one. Yeah.
In-kind support?
Yes. Gifts in kind, absolutely. What could a gift in kind be, Ian?
I suppose items, capital items.
Yeah,
help, promotion, that kind of thing. I've met someone, they got help with like leaflets, promoting that kind of thing, marketing.
We used to have people come and volunteer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like big companies.
Perfect. I think that's a great one. Another good version, a good gifting kind there. Sponsorship as well. Some good sponsorship deals. I mean, I think Twinings, WaterAid, that sort of deal. And then we've got cause-related marketing. So what we're going to spend most of the time on today are these top two. I think the most of the relationships, especially for smaller organizations, tend to be the cash and the gifts in kind. I think the time one is a great one as well there. So I'm thinking from a cash perspective, it could be a cash grant or it could be a meal and coffee morning. Items for raffle, of course, that's a good gift in kind. Meeting rooms. I mean, for example, my charity DSC will provide the meeting room for my AGM this year for St Mary's Secret Garden. It's not that major, but it's handy to have. I mean, for charities that are having to use Zoom accounts more and more, have you spoke to a company in your area and seen if they have a Zoom account they would let you use for free? They might even fund your Zoom account for you. So meeting rooms, sponsorships, yeah, Twinings, WaterAid, I just mentioned. A great one actually from last year, this one, Kew Gardens and Herbal Essences. It's a really good example of Herbal Essences actually almost benefiting more than Kew Gardens did from this relationship. And this was a sort of a cash relationship where Kew Gardens logo was on some certain Herbal Essences shampoos. And whether that was good for Kew Gardens or not, I think it's kind of on the fence actually from an ethical perspective, whether they should be condoning those sorts of products. So I would say in that perspective, kind of Herbal Essences came out of it better than Kew Gardens did. And so there are some positions where companies will be vying for your attention and vying to give you money as well. And that's a great position to be in if you're a big brand like Kew. So there's different conversations we can have with corporates. And almost that makes it harder because when you're having a straight cash conversation with a grant giver, it's very obvious, it's very honest where that conversation is going. But when you are having a bit of a conversation that could end up in financial support, or it could end up in items, or it could end up in meeting rooms, it's a tough one. You have to do a little bit more preparation beforehand to have an idea what outcomes they may wish to provide and what you may desire. So ethics. Has anybody been in an ethical position when you've been getting funded by a company? I think we're going to be okay, aren't we? I think in terms of smaller charities, there are less benefits for companies to work alongside from like a greenwashing or from an ethical perspective. There's going to be less of an ethical dilemma among small companies, but also less of a kind of pressing urgency to align themselves with charities that are slightly smaller as well. But I mean, yeah, it's common sense. You're going to know in your gut, you're going to know in your heart deep down whether this is the right relationship. I mean, if you don't, I would love for you to reach out to me and talk to me, or to speak to your trustees or your directors, or to speak to Companies House or charity commissions, or to speak to your governing bodies. But it's common sense. I mean, some charities have a policy on this. Again, if you have something that's maybe if you're quite a niche charity, for example, the cancer research ones, or if you have a specific agenda, you might want to write a policy just saying what kind of money you do accept and where from. So benefits of corporate giving, we mentioned time, access to a skilled workforce. This is the best one actually, is you have longer relationships. And for me, that's been the most valuable to working with corporates over grant givers, is this long-term relationships. And I mentioned the one with the gloves earlier, the worshipful company of glovers. That relationship has no end date. That is not going to have to run out every year, and I'm not going to have to reapply for that sum of money or for those products. They want to work with us indefinitely. And companies also tend to want to do that. It makes it tough when they leave, because you might have had that relationship for 10 years and they might be wishing to go somewhere else, or it might be the opposite way around. You might just wish to go somewhere else and they might be the ones losing out. But the long-term relationships can be really positive, and they can be quite bespoke, and you can be really good, clever there to work with the local businesses for longer-term relationships. And unique as well. Yeah, it's a unique area. And of course, CSR. Downsides, and this is changing. This is changing. I still find the majority of companies, especially small privately owned companies, do not exist to give money. And if you're trying to ask someone whose bottom line goes into their back pocket to give you money, it's a lot harder ask than if you're asking a company that has shareholders and has tax incentives to giving money, to give you money. So I think there are a few people in that position as well that want to maybe start having those smaller conversations. You've got to remember they don't exist to give you money. And actually, addressing that's quite powerful, and you can address that in the negotiation. You'd be like, look, I know you don't exist to give money, and what you then follow is the important thing. It's then why you would be giving, why they would then give you money, and we'll look at how you can phrase that. But addressing that they don't exist to give you money is quite powerful. Insincere reasons to fund, again, ethical decisions. You have to use your trust on your gut and trust on your policies and your support networks to answer those questions. So I've just spoken for a lot, just over half an hour really. How does everyone feel on that? Pretty simple. That's what corporate fundraising is. That's how corporate fundraisers operate. Does anybody want to go back over anything we've just spoken about? Cool. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at, let me just scroll down to it on my notes. This is the joy of having Zoom, a phone, a chat box to look at everything. So we're going to look at approaching. So this is how we find out where the companies are at. So in terms of applications, what is a good application happening? So this is what you're going to be talking about when you're actually prospecting people, when you're applying to them, and this is what they're going to want to know. This is what the companies, well, they may want to know. A good company is going to be interested in what you're actually solving, what your charitable objects are actually delivering against. So what is the problem and the need? What is your proposal? And when you're actually approaching companies, do you approach them with a general, this is my charity, I need money, or do you approach them with, this is a project we're looking to deliver, we come to you specifically? I mean, if I put that as a question, who fundraises in terms of the projects that their organization needs to deliver? So does anybody think, I've got to deliver this activity for this beneficiary, this group of beneficiaries on these days, this is how much it's going to cost, and then they go and fund for that? Or
we'd like to, but we're sort of stuck in because we don't have that money outside of our grants and our contracted services. We don't want to kind of start designing the services if we don't then think we're going to get the money for it. So we kind of almost want to get the money first and know what we've got and then assign it. But we'd like to do it the other way around. But we're sort of stuck in a weird loop.
Yeah, has that worked, Alice?
No, not at all. We're terrible at fundraising. None of us are fundraisers, so we don't know what we're doing at all. But it's sort of, I think, because we're all so busy with the actual project delivery, we want to make sure that we're still delivering those things. And so designing a service that we then like to do that might not be able to be delivered can seem like a time waste. And so we don't want to lose that. But I appreciate that's not the best way to view it.
No, I understand. And I do have an exercise for costing, which we might want to do. I wasn't going to do as part of this training, but it's a really clever way to establish how much a project costs in 10 minutes. And so you're going to want to, I think the reason why you struggled, Alice, is because you are doing it the wrong way around. You want to be able to tell people what it is that you need, and you want to be able to specifically say this is the project. Has anybody completed an awards for all application, big lottery fund, or I should call them the National Lottery Community Fund? So that's a really simple grant giving application, £10,000. Yes, did you say, Darmont, you've done that, have you? Were you successful?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. So what did they ask you to apply for? How did they ask you to apply?
We just found the application and we just applied. And
what's the first question?
Refusals a couple of times, but the third time we were successful. So.
Fine. So the first question they'll ask you is, what's the project name?
Yeah.
And that's how I approach every single funding discussion, is what is the project that I'm delivering for? So Alice, I think you would need to design this project first, and you would need to at least have boundaries for maybe different price points that people could get involved at, and maybe different outcomes that could be delivered upon different price points. But you need to have your proposal in place that says, I'm going to ask you for £15,000. 11,500 of those pounds are going to cover staff wages. £500 is going to cost the cover of keeping the building open. £500 is going to go towards subsidising the beneficiaries' travel costs so they can actually attend. And you want to be able to have that information right away, ready to go. Does anybody have that information at their organisation ready to go? It sounds like you do, Lance.
Yeah, we do as well. With Young Urban Arts, we have, certainly not for a grant application, because George, as you said, we do have to put what the project name is.
Of course, yeah.
For that, that's a bit separate. But in my conversations with corporations, I've presented a set of either 3 or 4 of our main core programs and isolated out the amount of money per project based on the length of time. So I've had feedback of, we really like this program because it fits in with this goal that we want to achieve. So we'll give this much for, this specific program. So it gives us the ability to be a bit more creative with the amounts that we're asking for, but also then gives the corporation a greater pool of programs to choose from based on what makes the most sense for them.
Absolutely. I like that. And how many projects do you have, Jessica, just out of interest?
We have 3 and we're expanding a 4th one.
That's
so
really cool.
3 really core programs, and then we're expanding, and a 4th one as well.
Yeah, so I'd say we're similar. At the Garden, we have 4, and we're 4 that run most years. And of course, they change, they evolve, they require different amounts of money. But 4 kind of core projects that we tend to run similarly on a rolling yearly basis. And for that, 4 completely different application journeys, 4 completely different areas of funding, 4 completely different conversations. Some of them are funded by major donors and individuals, one of them, and the rest are all funded by grant-giving charities, actually. But it's about having those projects at this point. So if you don't have that, I would suggest at this early stage, you would need to have a think about what those projects might look like for you, what kind of individuals within your organizations deliver against those projects, what their time costs. And again, I can share you a costing sheet that I train on another course potentially, and we may even get time today to look at it. So you need your proposal, you need to know what project it is you're funding for. So they're going to look at your suitability. How well are you going to be the organization that delivers this? Is this another charity in your area that does this? On my case for support for the Garden, for St Mary's Garden, I have an image of London and where all the disadvantaged adults live. And then I have the location of the garden. So what our objectives are to help disadvantaged adults find social inclusion through gardening. And so I put a clear picture of London and that clearly shows our suitability. And again, that's what Toby says, using images, using video to have an emotional connection to the brain. Works a lot faster with video and images than it can do with words. And you can use those in your applications if you're doing written ones. The costing, of course, important, really important stage. And the commitment of the beneficiaries. So we always try to have projects. In fact, I say we actually are at a point now where all of our projects are asked for by the beneficiaries. So whether we're applying to a corporate or whoever, we're able to specifically say, this beneficiary said this, and this beneficiary said this, and this is why we're building this new project. So an example is we have a company, we bought another organization, actually. We consumed another charity called the Golden Company, and they run beehives on some of the roofs of buildings in London. So the London Stock Exchange has a beehive run by my charity. And we wanted to expand that. We wanted to put more beehives in place. We spoke to the beneficiaries and they were like, absolutely no way. We do not want to go to more buildings in London. You've given us 3 buildings that we go to, and that's bad enough. Like they have a familiarity to those buildings and to the garden that they love, but the idea of them becoming people that then just end up going to different buildings every day and working on beehives just wasn't what they wanted. And as much as that could have fit our charitable objects, it wasn't what our beneficiaries wanted. And as the directors and as the trustees, we thought this is really cool, they're going to love it, but then we asked them and they didn't want this. So the commitment of the beneficiaries is so critical as well. And if you can show that through surveys or through even having beneficiaries attend meetings or attend AGMs and being able to talk to your members and beneficiaries and other beneficiaries, that's a really good way to kind of show commitment of your projects as well. So before you apply, and again, this is an early stage, this is what we want, and this is potentially stuff you can ask other people for. So your accounts, if you don't know where your accounts are, they're on Companies House, and you should know where your accounts are, and you should know on the Charity Commission's website if you've had any flags in the last 5 years. My garden had a flag for a late upload, which is very embarrassing and does impact our ability to fundraise sometimes. So you need to be aware, and actually that red flag impacts our credibility. So we were late putting in our accounts 1 year. That impacts our credibility. So accounts, case for support. Does anybody know what a case for support is? I'm waiting to see one nod. So a case for support. Go on. Who's that?
I said no.
No, fine. So a case for support is almost an application that is written as if it could go to anyone. And it's the sort of document that if you wanted to say to, if your family said to you, what do you do? And as a fundraiser, you would give them this document and you'd want to leave them in tears, maybe not tears. You want to leave them smiling, you want to leave them happy, you want to leave them feeling emotional about the work your organization does. So this is a document that you would give to a corporate, you might leave behind with a corporate. Shall I show you one? I think I wasn't going to, but I will show you one quickly. And what I'll do is I can also give it to Toby to send out as well. So if I open up my case for support for the garden, I much prefer this screen without me sharing. It's a lot nicer seeing everybody's faces. It's a lot bigger. Let's have a, where are we then? So if I open up my case for support, and yeah, so this is a document that you can build alongside your other fundraisers or maybe your directors to just establish kind of a fundraising sort of vision. It's kind of like a vision document. Let me open it up. Case for support. Here we are. Okay, so if I share my screen again. Okay, I'm going to switch to Word this time. So this is my case for support, and I'll send you this, so don't feel like you have to read every word. But I just want to draw attention to this. So the first thing I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the garden. And this is almost how you want to start organizations with companies, how you want to start conversations with companies as well. And so you're not going to robotically say last Christmas 1 million people spent the day alone. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to show them the need that your charity has to exist. What's the reason? And it's not because you served X, Y, Z amount of beneficiaries last year. And it's not because you were funded by this person. It's not because of the feedback you get. It's because the conclusive research says that you need to exist, and it says that these people suffer if you're not there, and these people have worse experiences when you're not there. And so this is the case for support document. And as I say, I'll send you this as well. And this was the image I spoke about earlier. And this helps us really firmly kind of stick in the minds of people. And then it's only the secondary part where I actually talk about the garden. So I'll close this down and you'll get the copy of this. So you can see that what I talk about here, what we do, why us, and honestly, just deconstruct it and write your own. It's a really fun process to do. I mean, for this learning process here, in terms of getting the statistics, has helped me for every single application. I mention this on every single application I do. I mention this in every single conversation I have. And so what I've done is I've put myself in a position where I can say, look, we know that poor mental health costs the NHS over 100 billion per year. That's not just impacting your organization, that's impacting the organization, your staff families, that's impacting your staff's friends. And so we can have really emotional conversations. And it's about getting people into that emotional energy state when you're in this early part. So that's the case for support. Let me go back to the PowerPoint.
So before, go on. Here, just remind everyone we've got a session coming up on the 23rd of September, which is about getting data. So just on top of that, about if you want to form that sort of document, yeah, if you sign up for the session on data, that will be exactly the sort of thing that we'll be showing you how to get something to make that impact on that sort of document.
That's really cool. And it is, the data can be the hardest bit, actually. So for me, I'm in Hackney Council. Hackney Council are brilliant, and they got a lot of that data straight away on their website. But I wouldn't say it's, if you make that, I would honestly make that document. I think it's like not having a vision for your organization. That's not having a fundraising plan. The emotional energy that you can get from having that sort of data will take you through so many moments, take you through so many awkward conversations with individuals. You know, that moment when you're talking to someone and it kind of pauses and you feel like you're losing them. You can say, look, we know that this costs £1 billion every year, and we know that we're not going to solve this on our own. We know that you can't solve this on your own. It's about having those kind of drop-in points. And I think just making a case for support can help you be in that position. So ideal donor, I don't have one of these. I do a very minimum amount of individual fundraising, but there are some charities that get a lot of money from individuals, and it can be nice for companies to know who your ideal donor are. If they're looking to use you for brand exposure, they want to know where your donors are. Are your donors on Instagram? Are they on Snapchat? Where do they shop? Do they go to Debenhams, Marks and Spencer's? Do they go to Waitrose? Do they go to Lidl? Where are they shopping? Are these the same places where the brands that you're looking to work with, the companies you're looking to work with, are they the same places that they are? If these companies, let's say you're working with a, I don't know, like a small clothing brand, where are those clothes sold? Are they the same places that the donors of this charity are shopping? The ideal donor list, as I say, I don't have one of these personally, because I don't do a lot of individual fundraising. If you do, build one. The companies you work with are going to want to know that. So, case for support, yeah, these are the questions. Who are you? What is the need to be met? What is the solution? Who should take it? Why should your organization take this on? These are just questions to ask yourself when you're building it. What is the future of your organization? So, I'm pleased that someone asked this question earlier. So, how much to ask for? Anybody that has costed a project, I'm thinking of the lady earlier that was talking about the specific projects they're funding for. How do you cost your projects at the moment? How do you decide how much to ask for?
I think that may have been me.
I think it was you, Jessica, as well. Sorry, I didn't want to. That was my memory was betraying me there, wasn't it?
Ours is based on, because our programs primarily provide for out-of-school activities, we cost ours out on a weekly or monthly basis. So it's either a 3-month program, 6-month annual program. So that's really where we start in terms of costing things out. We're relatively new for the corporate fundraising. We've primarily been doing grants and trusts and things like that. So this is still new, but in terms of the way that we cost it out, it is based on the per program cost.
Lovely. That makes sense. And what about the individual elements within that? Do you look at staff time? And let me just show you what I look at. So in terms of staff costs, how do you factor that in?
At the moment, it's based on whatever the program costs is based on staff salary, volunteers, if we need to provide transportation for some of the young people, facilitators, the program. We have a bus program, so petrol, the driver, all of that is encompassed in the total program ask. So then when it gets down to the details of specifically what they're giving money for, it's all broken down.
That's really good. That's perfect. And I think it's almost the complete way to do it. Of course, there are some other things as well. So for example, this is kind of how I break it down at the garden. So we look at equipment, whether that's compost or whether that's pots or whatever it could be. And we can break it down, and I'll show you how to do that. But there's some other things here: stationery, expenses, overheads, of course. So there is an exercise I do for this, which I'm not going to run today because we won't have the time. So I'm just going to quickly, briefly explain it. So for example, if you were fundraising, let's say you had £10,000 worth of salary costs at your organization, and you were operating 5 days a week. So that means £2,000 a day is staff costs. So if you're operating 5 days a week, if someone's covering a project for one of those days, they have to meet 1/5 of your salary funding. And this is kind of sort of how I do it. So as I say, let's say salary is 10,000, let's say your equipment is £500. And so if we're using 1 day's time, so 1/5 of the salary, So £2,000 for the salary, but maybe we're using half of the equipment, using 50% of the equipment, it would be £250 off the equipment and 1/5 of the salary, £2,000. And I go through each of our kind of financial lines from last year, and that's how I cost every single project. So I get a total cost for equipment, so compost pots, I get a total cost for office expenses, whatever it was, printing services, anything, any subscriptions we may have for cloud-based Dropbox or whatever it is, staff expenses, volunteer expenses, overheads, and then I simply just divide it by the amount of time I'm going to need that for next year. And I mean, there are some projects you can be more objective for. If you know that a project's only going to use a certain amount of pens or paper, you can of course put that in exactly, but if it's going to use a percentage of your total, you need to look at that as a percentage. You need to look at your costs last year, and you need to look at what that project is going to take next year from those as a percentage, and that's your kind of costing there. Alice, was it you that was talking earlier about not sure how to cost properly?
So I probably articulated it a bit badly, because we've got a business development manager who kind of submits for the grants and like funds and stuff for kind of where we design projects and stuff like that. But our issue is sort of more around unrestricted funding, where we can then use it to kind of build out new services that we don't currently, or kind of build out a project that we might want to, basically just to give us that bit of a buffer, because we are completely kind of contractually dependent on our grants and services that we provide through CCGs. And so just to have some money that we could therefore put into other projects if one's running low or stuff like that, it's sort of, that's where our issue comes from. And so I wouldn't know how to cost that element, if that makes sense.
Fine. So that's actually your overheads. So just to briefly explain there, we won't cover this in detail today. So Alice is talking about the difference between restricted funds and unrestricted funds. So if you go to a charity, a grant giver, and you get money from them, typically that'll be restricted. So if I say I'm going to deliver this let's say I do this training course for free, and I'm being funded to deliver that. If none of you turned up and I wasn't able to deliver it, the charity that funded me would be able to take that money back, because it's restricted and it had to be used to deliver this training course. So Alice is talking about getting access to unrestricted money, which means you can use it for pretty much anything you'd like, including overheads, core costs, those sorts of things. And that's one thing that companies do. The reason I don't mention it is because most company funding is unrestricted. They're typically giving you money that is unrestricted, which is also a big positive. But I mean, Alice, I would look at getting funding from the overhead side of things. So if you can also apply for core costs if you're looking for grant giving. Maybe we'll take this offline, Alice, actually. You'll have my email at the end, and it might be worth you kind of sending me an email, because I think we could get lost in it, couldn't we? Because it's interesting position. It's an interesting position you're in, and you can lose time by taking the wrong step, I think. So
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. So costing your fundraising, I mean, these are just some ideas. You'll know, get your finance manager to tell you what was spent last year, and they'll send you an itemized list of a balance sheet of everything that's on there. And when you're building your projects, then you already have the cost from last year you can then use to look to the new year. Of course, if you have more staff, or you're going to spend more money, you need to account for that. So don't just look at what was spent last year. You have to think what's going to be spent this year. And then you cost your project based on how much of a percentage of that time it's going to take up. So really, it can be quite tough to cost accurately. But when you have costed accurately, it gives you so much power in the negotiation, because you know that's the right price. So that's costing. This slide will be here. But again, like I've offered to Alice, please just, if you've sat there really confused about this, I will happily have an email conversation with anybody about this afterwards, because it can be confusing. So the application journey. So we're going to take our corporates on a journey, and that journey is pretty straightforward, and it starts really early on. So the first thing, identify the projects. And it sounds to me there's a lot of people in that boat already. We're just in the identifying project stage. We need to know what our different projects could be, how much money they could bring in, who's going to be involved with them, does that use all of our staff time? So what are those projects? What's our credibility? I mean, I'd like to hope that it doesn't seem like there's many issues at step 2. So I think that's really positive. I think most of you be going straight to step 3. So this is when we're kind of planning how long these projects are going to run for, when you're going to need to apply for them. So right now, I'm actually in a quite calm position. My next project that runs out in the garden is July 2021. So my planning is going to be back at step 1. I'm going to be identifying the projects for next year in probably January 2021. And then I'll be planning for how I'm going to fund for that money about March time, maybe 3 months before. So going to cost it again. And we're going to research grant prospects. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this one. It's the next thing we've got coming up. How do we find new people? Of course, that says grant prospects, but funders, partners, whoever it may be, individuals, whoever those funders may be. We're going to, of course, write a good proposal. We might not write anything. Some companies might not want to write anything. It might be a conversation on the phone. It might be a contract. It might not be a proposal as such. It might just be something else. And then we're going to, of course, make the ask. We're going to make the ask, and we're going to communicate as well. So we're going to make the approach. We're going to talk to them about what we want, and then we're going to obviously follow up. So this is the journey stage that I use. The key thing is that you're identifying your projects early. That's the first thing I do with anybody, is identify projects and understand how the money that they need is going to come from those projects. The amount of times I sit there and someone says, oh gosh, I need to raise £500,000. But then it's like, let's work backwards. What projects do we need to run to make £500,000? So approaching corporates. Anybody that's been approaching so far? So Anne, maybe you'd be a good person for this one. How have you been approaching people so far? You're not allowed to laugh.
Oh dear.
Oh, you got muted then. Muted.
No, sorry. Okay, that's better. Well, we were terribly fortunate in that one of our trustees worked at the time for the organisation. So, and he was aware that they had, you know, a couple of charities every year that they funded, and really cool. He made sure that our organisation got into the picture. You know, next time the funders or the charity committee within the company were looking to change charities.
Awesome.
But that trustee is now left and left the organisation. He's still a trustee, but he's working for somebody else now.
Can't get the right trustees these days, can you? Gosh, couldn't just stay there, could he?
No. So we're kind of between well,
I understand. Don't worry. That makes sense.
Yeah. So our funding from his old employer has been drying up, to be honest, in the last year or so. And we've not been able to really find out what's going on and have, you know, the right conversations with people. And because Rodrigo's not there anymore, you know, we've kind of, well, we've lost that very personal connection.
Have you tried to reignite it?
Yes, but I don't know, maybe we haven't tried hard enough.
Fine. Okay.
Don't worry. Sure.
Don't worry. Yeah. I imagine the answer is yes to that. It's hard to try hard, and it's hard to. I think this doesn't help because we're British. Honestly, we have a kind of reluctance to be pushy and to be asky and to pick up the phone. And I mean, the reason why I know that I've done so well in my sales job is because I have this weird inbuilt ability to pick up the phone and talk to strangers, and I'm lucky to have that. And that's why I love training this course, because I try and train it objectively and make it as human as possible. Because, I mean, when we deal with sales calls, I personally don't have a negative attitude. And actually, I've been sold to before. I mean, and we all have experiences of being sold to. You know, when you see an advert on TV and you think, damn, I need that. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing that's happened. And so what you're doing is you're talking to organizations about their ability to be involved with social change. You're giving someone a reason why, and it is as big as this, for someone who maybe is a CEO of a family business that has £50 million turnover, substantial sums of money. You're giving them something that they're going to be able to take to their deathbed with them. They're going to have helped your beneficiaries to achieve positive social change. And you'll find that people reflect on that more than they reflect on any financial win in a year. And actually, there's been corporates that I've worked with, which are, in fact, not necessarily indirectly with me, with people that I've mentored and people that I've coached, that are just so thankful for the opportunity to work with charities. And actually, you have to get a lot of no's to get there. You can have a lot of people that don't want to speak to you. But that opportunity to help a company and help the company's individuals that work there to have a closer tie to their community and to social change, it is an opportunity that we're really lucky to have. And it's really positive that we're able to have that message. So approaching corporates it is vital and it's important. And ideally, the whole charity sector wouldn't even exist, would it? And we wouldn't need us, but we do. And corporates are primarily one of the reasons why we have to exist. And they need to have a think about how they can help social change. And we need to encourage them to have those conversations. So in terms of approaching corporates, these are the areas I go to find them. LinkedIn, less so as a direct source. I use LinkedIn really clever, and I'll show you on the next slide really cleverly, and I'll show you next, but don't tend to go straight to LinkedIn. Events, you can meet corporates at events. A great place to be, to meet people in sort of you're both finding it awkward to network stage. You're not going into their territory, they're not coming to your territory, you're meeting on kind of even ground. Local area, of course, you could walk the streets, go into shops, go into the less and less local shops these days, but going into local shops. I mean, if you've got a co-op near you, finding out where that cooperative branch is like kind of managed. Obviously, they're a different type of organisation, a membership organisation, so slightly different sort of values there. Yelp, Yellow Pages, you can use the Yellow Pages to find businesses, as silly as that. It's actually a really good resource just for finding smaller businesses in your area. The two that I use pretty exclusively, though, I use Google and actually Google Maps more specifically. Just to show local businesses in your areas. You can search restaurants on a big square and find every single restaurant. You could search trade shops, or you could search for anything, and it will bring up absolutely every single provider in your local area. Has anybody used anything like this to find companies before? How does anyone feel about finding a list of companies and giving them a call? Is anybody just really excited about that? Can't wait to do that. As soon as this training finishes, they're going to pick up the phone and they're just going to start making phone calls.
Definitely.
So I didn't expect anybody to say yes. I've never had a training course where someone's gone, oh, I'm so excited already. You've sold the idea of cold calling to me. But the reality of the situation is you hold a very fortunate position to share the message of your charity, and that is an exciting place to be in. And these corporates aren't going to come to you. They're just not. I mean, they might, but they're not really going to come to you. They're not going to find you and say, we want to give you money. They're not there to give you money. They're not a grant giving charity with an application form on the website. They're not an individual who is used to being street fundraised from, or used to kind of finding online appeals. They're a different company, and they're a different type of organization. They expect to have the phone someone to pick up the phone to them. So I'm going to show some slides now. And they're little anecdotes that I used and stages to phone calls that I used. And I think, yes, it's great for you to have what I'm going to write down, and what I'm going to challenge you to do in a second is also to write down your own little opening pitch. But the challenge is more for your mind, for you to think about the mindset of actually making these phone calls. And I mean, I will never forget the first sales call I did, because it went so badly. It just went so badly. And the chances are that yours wouldn't go as bad as that, but you're going to have a lot of tough conversations, and you're going to have a lot of awkward moments on the phone when you're calling companies and you're calling corporates. But I can guarantee that for every 15, 20 times you have a bad conversation, someone's going to pick up the phone and they're going to say, I'm so pleased you've called. Do you know what? We've been thinking about this for ages and we had no idea how to get involved. I'm so pleased you've called. And the amount of times I've had that moment, it maybe doesn't make it all worth it. There's still a lot of pain you got to go through to get to that point. But for every 15, 20 organizations you call, there's probably going to be one out there that wants to talk to you. And you're going to learn about what works as well. You're going to learn about what projects people want to hear about. It's almost like you're market testing your own ideas in your own language. And it's a really cool way to expand sort of your own understanding of how well people receive your ideas that your charity are kind of implementing. How does this feel so far to everybody? Was everybody hoping that this wouldn't go down the cold call route? I mean, I see a few nods, and definitely, yeah. I mean, the reality is this is the route that you will have to take to be able to reach a lot of different companies. I mean, you're going to have some love at events, definitely, when they start picking up, and you're going to find some love just by kind of talking to people in your local area. But this is how you're going to achieve big growth. You're going to by talking to people on the phone. And that's the best way to cover the most ground. So in terms of finding the decision makers, so what you want to do is you want to know who you're going to speak to as well. So you can always call up and say, oh, I want some money from you, please. But what you really want to do is you want to call up and say, hi, I'm calling from the Directory of Social Change. I want to speak to Toby, please. And you know that because you already have the right name. So you not only do you find the name of the organization on Google, Google Maps, Yelp, events, LinkedIn, whatever it is. If it's a small organization, you might find it really easily on LinkedIn, but there's another way to do it. So you can either go on the search box or, and I can't believe this is better than using LinkedIn directly, but just using the Google search is really, really powerful. And so, for example, on Google there, all you do is type LinkedIn, and then you type the name of the organization and then the job role. So in this circumstance, I was just Googling every single researcher at the Directory of Social Change. So this is really powerful because it doesn't just show you current researchers, but it also shows you past researchers as well. Someone was saying something, sorry. So what we're doing is we're building up a list of companies and then a list of the decision makers as well. Does anybody have an idea what kind of roles people would be working in at the organizations they want to chase? I'm thinking HR roles, just CEO roles, MD roles, maybe marketing roles, those sorts of areas. It does depend on the organization. Smaller organizations, everything might go through the MD. Slightly bigger, you might be able to go to HR, marketing. It depends what your project is and what you need from them as well. So for example, if you're just looking to market your kind of charitable services using their marketing line, go to their marketing manager. So yeah, this is how I find people. So just LinkedIn, the name of the organization, and then the job role as well there. And that allows you to come up straight away with individuals that work at the organization in that area. If for any reason you get an individual that maybe used to work there, you can be a little bit cheeky. So let's say, for example, I'm calling Ealing and Hounslow in a year's time and Toby's left. So what I would do is I'd call Ealing and Hounslow and say, oh, can I speak to Toby, please? And then I might know that because I'm working with him now. Or, of course, you might have just Googled his name and saw that he left, but you don't know anybody else that works in that department. And then when they say Toby's left, you're going to say, oh, well, who's replaced him? So they already think you have a relationship with Toby, which you may or may not have, and they're going to be more inclined to help you out. So this is what we're talking about, dealing with the gatekeepers. So LinkedIn, searching LinkedIn in this way is a really good way to find people that maybe worked in that role in the past as well, and using that as an in. So to reach out to a new contact, we mentioned phone. How else might we reach out to a new organization or a new company? I think we said events, didn't we, as well? Oh, email. I thought events was next. Anywhere else we might reach new people? Social media as well. There are different ways to meet new organizations. I mean, the phone is going to be the master here. It really is. It's about picking up the phone. But of course, once you phone somebody, email them straight away, follow up if you have their email address. Even if you're just sending it to an info at email address, even if you've been fobbed off by the gatekeeper and they're telling you, oh no, we don't do that, you say, thank you very much, and you email them anyway. I mean, even now, last year I did about 1,500 calls, sales calls, in the last quarter. And I got an email from one of those emails that I sent in October last week. Someone emailed me back going, I'm sorry, I've been meaning to get to this. I mean, 9 months, that's probably the longest I've ever had in my life. But an email I sent 9 months ago, someone replied to, and they not only they must have seen that email loads of times, which is amazing. And I'll show you why that's amazing in a sec, but they actually bothered to reply in the end. And I could have just called that organization, that charity, and I could have just said to them, fine, thanks, they're not there, put the phone down and gone away. But no, I took the time to email and follow up. So I called them, they weren't available, I emailed, and then I followed, and then I left it. I mean, I did try and call them a few times. I think I normally do about 3 times before I give up. If someone's not going to pick up the phone 3 times, just give up. But that's up to you. And my gut told me to give up, actually, and it's probably the wrong shout because they came back to me. But if you phone and then email, really, really powerful. So I use a call diary. Does anybody not have a CRM? And if you don't know what a CRM is, the answer is yes, I don't have a CRM. So a CRM is a system that can log customer information in terms of how many times you spoke to them, their details. I'm just thinking now. So I've put this in because most organizations that I work with that are smaller don't have this. So I'm guessing that most people are in the same boat as my smaller charity that I volunteer for. So what I do is I have a call diary, and you'll get this afterwards. I'll send you this Excel sheet I'll give it to Toby to send out. So what we have here is we're going to have the name of the person, the project that you're looking to help them fund for, their details, their email. And then this here goes all the way across: first contact, second contact, third contact, fourth contact, all the way through. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to build it up sideways. Oh gosh, let me go back. We're going to look to build up these blue columns here and speak to people as many times as we can. How are we feeling? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So what I found and what my experience has told me is that it pretty much is obvious what we need to be doing. We need to speak to people, we need to pick up the phone, and we need to say the right words, and we need to speak to them a few times to be able to build familiarity. So what we're looking to do is, and some of you may have just seen this slide when it came up then, we're looking to build familiarity, and we're looking to speak to people 15 to 20 times. And that's not necessarily you. That's not necessarily George and I picking up the phone 15 to 20 times. That might be them receiving your newsletter. That might be them seeing a tweet. And this is why when someone mentioned earlier about putting personal stories on their social media, this is so, so valuable. And if you have a big social media following and the company that you're following, your company that you're trying to partner with has already seen that, they're going to already know who you are. I mean, I'm so lucky that I work for the Directory of Social Change because their brand is so big that I speak to people on the phone and they go, I know who you are. And I think, well, damn, that's the hard part done already. And some of you might be in that position when you're calling companies. They might go, yeah, of course they know who you are. If you have a charity shop, businesses on that local area may know who you are. They may give to that charity shop. They may give some clothes or whatever it is to that shop. So it's 15 to 20 times. That's a big number, and it's a big number for a reason. I put it again, 15 to 20 times. Imagine this is the reason why we get bombarded by adverts. This is the reason why Coca-Cola advertises to us, because they know that they have to subliminally keep appearing in front of our eyes this many times to remain relevant. And it's exactly the same for us when we're trying to sell, when we're trying to partner. We want the organization to have touched base with us 15 to 20 times. And maybe that's 5 cold calls and 3 or 4 emails. And maybe that's also they're on your newsletter and they've also seen some tweets. I mean, it's again, that familiarity. And it's the reason why I used to use the same picture on my Twitter and my LinkedIn. I want people to see the same picture over and over again. I want them to know who I am when I'm selling to them. They want them to recognize my face. So that familiarity is really important as well. So even if you're getting a no from someone, you're knocking off one of those 15 to 20 times. You really are. And a no is one less no that you're going to get in the future. So don't be disheartened from the no's, but just know that you're doing part of the work. That it gets to it. This job is not going to be win, 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 win. It's going to be win, loss, 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 win, loss, loss. There's going to be a lot of times that we're going to be taking more losses than wins. And it's about just recognizing that we're building this up. We're building up our profile. So it's all well and good knowing you have to speak to people. And of course, yeah, go where your partners are. Go to where they are. If they're not on Google and they're not on Google Maps, you might need to go and knock on their doors. You might need to. Of course, it's COVID time. It's a little bit different. Me training this is slightly stranger, actually. It is going to be more back to the phone, isn't it? But go where your partners are. Are they at trade shows? Are they doing a free event at the Excel? Can you go to their trade desk and speak to them? So go where your partners are. This is a really good one, actually. And this used to be a fun one when I was doing sales. So I'd spend time working with I used to manage nine salespeople, and you would be going through this long process, back and forth, negotiating, and then they'd make the ask, and that person would go, oh, I can't decide on this. I need to speak to this person. They've attended all these meetings. They've spoke to them on the phone, and it's not even the right person. So what we want to do early on, and again, this is when we find the person we want to call on LinkedIn, and then we're going to ask them this question. So we're going to ask them, in fact, the question comes up just after, but we want to know if we're talking to the right person. We want to know if it's the right job role. And of course, they confirm verbally. Just ask this question: are you the right person to be speaking to? And the reason I put this on its own slide is just because it's the biggest waste of time I see in sales and in corporate partnerships, is that you're building up this relationship with someone who just isn't the decision maker, it's their boss. I mean, it would be all well and good me and Toby chatting about doing some training if I then present a proposal to him and he goes, oh, well, I can't make that decision. And then I talk to his boss and his boss goes, oh, no, we can't do that. Of course, Toby was a decision maker, so he was able to say that in this case. But you want to make sure you're talking to the right person. Ask that question. And questions are great. Questions are really powerful. So this is a little bit that I've written in here, and this is how I would kind of approach a corporate. And you'll have these slides, so don't worry about taking this right away. So I'd say I'm calling from St Mary's Secret Garden, and I'd actually say my name. So I'd say my name's George and I'm calling from St Mary's Secret Garden. So I've been speaking to similar organisations in your area at the moment about a project we run here. So we're running a project called Supported Volunteering. Are you the right person at Y Corporate to be speaking to? And that's pretty much my opener. That's the first question. So you've already spoke to the gatekeeper. You've already asked to be put through, and you've just been put through. The big scary moment is speaking to the person, and that's what you say. And you're asking them straight away for a question. And there's many reasons why you would do that. As soon as you ask a question of someone, the pressure's off. You need to give yourself a moment on that phone call early on where the pressure is off. You don't want to be in a position where you're constantly fighting for the next thing to say. You want to be able to give yourself listening mode. And so you're going to ask that question straight away. Am I the right person? People don't like to be the wrong person. So if they are in the right person, they probably will say that. They won't just say the wrong thing to be difficult. They will actually kind of say they're the right person. Also, most people want to help. They'll give you the right person to speak to, if not. But it's a great question to get in there early on. So these are some more questions. And this one I love. So people say, is now a good time to talk? And there's a little bit of a mix. I've seen salespeople that would never ask that question because everyone's going to say no. And if they don't say no, absolutely brilliant. But the good thing about people saying no, well, when is a good time? And again, people could just say no again to that. And then you've got to think in your gut, is this person the right person to be speaking to? If someone has taken a call from a charity and they've said they don't want to talk to you and they don't want to book in a time to speak, probably best to leave them for a little bit. And even if you call them back in a month's time, 2 months' time, don't be pressuring people, and always be thankful. It can be really easy to get disheartened. But if someone says, nope, and I don't want to talk about this, just be really thankful for their time and just be thanks very much for taking time to talk to me today.
One thing, if you don't mind, just to add to
please.
the now is a good time to talk question. I've found that it's been successful to put a time parameter around it. So do you have 10 minutes or do you have, for a quick chat or something? Because I feel like, and some of the feedback I've received is good. It sort of opens it up into the person on the other end doesn't quite always know how much time you're going to be asking for.
Love that. Yeah.
So I just as a what I've found to be helpful, just to put a quick time parameter around it so they know how much time they're allowing to give you.
Jessica's absolutely right. Yes. And I mean, if you say 10 minutes and you get 10 minutes, you know you're in for a winner there. That's going to be someone who solidly wants to, they're either doing no work or they really want to help and they want to be with you. And Jessica's right. If you ask someone a question and they say yes, something switches in their brain. And then it stops them from being frustrated by anything that happens. Whereas if you don't ask that question and you keep talking and talking, they've not actually given you permission to talk. All they've done is not tell you to get off the phone. And so what you're doing by asking them is can I talk? You're actually seeking a psychological permission from them, which then engages them more actively with what you're saying. So it's really powerful, and it can be quite a good one to avoid. It's quite an easy one to avoid. Sorry, not a good one to avoid. It's a bad question to avoid, but it's a good one to. It's an easy one to avoid because you're always worried they're going to say no. However, there are many ways to deal with that no. When is a good time? It's just one way. I mean, I always like to say, do you know what? Everyone always says they don't have enough time to talk, and just kind of keep going anyway, and just agree with them, address them, and just, I don't know. There are different ways to deal with this. This is the softer way. When is a good time? Putting an exact time you want them for as well. Like Jessica said, it is brilliant. So the next one, would you consider partnering with us for this project to deliver X? And if we get time, I'll show you the video of the American fundraiser using what would you consider? I mean, she's terrifying. I would hate to be trying to I'd hate for her to ask for money from me because she really just gets people really well. Would you consider partnering with us for this project to deliver whatever it is? Would you consider partnering with us for this project to help one of our volunteers reach more beneficiaries? And they're going to say yes, they're going to say no. Well, what would you consider? And when you ask, what would you consider? They can't just say no. They can't just say yes. They have to think. They have to look up to the top left, and they have to engage brain, and they have to think about what they would consider. And that is, again, a powerful state. When you're asking people to reflect on questions or you ask them open questions, you're putting them in a really powerful position to support you and to think about what it is. So questions are the best. Can anyone give me any different types of questions? Any management trainees in the room? What management questions are we asked to use?
Open and close questions?
Yeah, exactly. Open, closed, perfect, yeah. Any more? Cool. So there's some others as well, but these are the 3 that we're going to talk about today. So open questions. So when I look at this question here, this is a closed question. Is now a good time to talk? Yes, no. This closes the discussion. So they can be quite scary to use unless you've got a kind of a prior plan. What you want to be asking are these ones. Again, this one's closed as well. But if you're using a closed question, you want to be prepared for the follow-up question. You want to know that if they say no, you've got something else to say. But it's the open questions where you're really going to have the value. So it cannot be answered about a simple yes or no. Closed questions are answered. Here we go. Look, we risk closing the discussion. And then follow-up questions is to do with engaging listening. I won't go through active listening today. I'm sure we've all heard a lot about active listening in our careers. If you can ask questions linked off what they've just been talking about, that's going to be a surefire way to just subtly, and again, they might not notice this. They might not actively recognize that you're responding to a question based on what they've said, but it just shows engagement. It shows that you're listening, and it's a good way for you to learn what they're talking about as well by thinking, what's my follow-up question? What can it be? So common mistakes. Can anyone think what a common mistake might be? The double question. The dreaded double question. Oh, would you be willing to partner with us for this project, or this one, or that, or maybe you can help us do this? The double question. Does anybody recognize the double question in something that they do? This used to be me big time. I used to be a big double questioner. Well, it sounds good. This sounds good. I mean, the double question for me is always a stickler. And if nobody's recognizing that in themselves, it might be because you're either brilliant questioners, which I'm sure some of you are great questioners, but maybe it's just you need to just think as well when you're reflecting on calls, when you're reflecting on discussions, have I double questioned someone? This is probably the most fun advice I get to give on any training. Watch chat shows and watch how they question people. Watch Jonathan Ross. I mean, he questions people in an incredible manner, and he really does provide some really cutting questions. And I'm sure he prepares some of them. And he's not the only one. I mean, all of them have got a quite high expertise at asking questions. And they never ask double questions. They never do. If they do, it's probably because they try to come up with their own question and not read the ones given to them. But the double question is a rare one. It almost softens it. It shows a little bit of weakness because you're not confident enough with the first question you've asked. You're trying to soften it. So the double question, again, these also can be applied to management if any of you are managers. So not waiting long enough, the wait for 8. Has anybody ever been taught this before? Waiting for 8 seconds after asking a question? Oh, it's the most cruel thing you'll ever do to anybody. I mean, fortunately, I don't have kids because I feel like they would hate me if I was to have any kids, because they wouldn't be able to ask me any questions because they know that they'd have to suffer for 8 seconds before I help them. So if you ask a question, the people we're speaking to are grown adults and they deserve the time to answer it. And that awkward moment that you're feeling when you ask a question is an awkward moment they're also feeling. And it's not your responsibility to make it less awkward for them. It's your responsibility to let them have the time to think about what you're asking. And clearly, if they don't know, they're going to wait for longer than 8 seconds, and then it is going to get awkward and you are going to have to say something. You might have to do a double question. You might have to ask another question if there really hasn't been any understanding. So for example, for me this morning, when I asked what is fundraising, I wait for 8 seconds just to see who wants to answer that question. If nobody does, then of course I start talking and start giving my own advice. But I give the opportunity for people to sit there and to think about answering that question themselves. And you're going to want to do this. And this is, if you take away anything from the training today, probably it's wait for 8. And when you really ask that powerful ask, you're asking someone, would you consider partnering with us on this project? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a long time. 6, 7, 8. There we go. If they haven't spoken in that moment, then I don't know. I let people sweat that one. It's a good question. Your whole discussion, this whole point of picking up the phone and cold calling people is getting you to that point that if you can't wait 8 more seconds for it.
Sorry.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're just common mistakes I see. That's a really powerful one, the wait for 8. Great with if you're managing people as well. If you ask them anything, just let them wait for 8. So what I'm thinking then is it might be quite nice if I show you a little bit more about what I say, if you kind of go away and maybe write your own little script down. So I'm just having a little look now. So this is how we qualify people. Are you responsible for charitable partnerships? How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? The problem you're solving. So for this one, I didn't actually write a question. I wrote an example because it's quite tough. The problem you're solving. So from working with similar organizations, we know that you can boost employee engagement by giving your staff 1 afternoon of volunteering in the charity sector. Did you know that? Yes, no. If they say yes, how much time do you give your staff to volunteer? If they say no, well, what we're doing is we're working with similar organizations to yourself so their staff can volunteer with charities like us in the sector. Do you think your staff would be interested in something like that? I don't. So that's the problem you're solving. And then of course, what do they need? What would you need to consider supporting us? What would make your staff volunteering with us look good for you? What does that look like for you? So I'm thinking it might be a nice idea now. And again, you can use this exact wording. So if you have a pen and paper or you have text edit, I think if we give ourselves, let's have a look how long we've got left. We've got 20 minutes. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to write down your own one. And again, you can use those exact words, but with your own charity's name in there, with your own project name in there, and maybe an example of a corporate you might want to reach. So write your own one, and we're going to build an entire sales sequence that you're going to use on the phone. Couple more minutes. Anybody got theirs written down? Give it a couple more minutes. Does anybody want to kick us off? Give me theirs. I might pick on someone. Who have we not heard from yet? Indira. We haven't heard from you yet today. Would you be interested in giving us, or is it, sorry, is it Mahalia? Is it your organization?
Hi, sorry, yeah, it's Indra. Hi there.
Hi.
Could you give me a bit more time? Just writing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Okay.
I'm a cruel trainer. I pick on people. I'm sorry.
Okay, shall I I've just written something very quickly, very short. Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah, that's great.
It's just an introduction. So a phone call basically. So right, here goes. Hi, I'm Indra Ellis. I'm calling from a West London charity called Action West London.
Lovely.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, thank you very much.
I'm calling today specifically to discuss how our charity can possibly add some value to your CSR programs.
Love that, yeah.
Are you the right person to speak to about this?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Indira, that was really good. Really good.
Thank you.
Cool. So that's a brilliant first step. And that's having this written down is something that you probably will only use for the first day, the first week or so. The first thing I do when I start a sales job or a corporate fundraising role, I write a little script and I write down what I'm going to say. And whenever I write anything down, whenever I write a script, I'm always delivering it slightly more forced and slightly less natural than if it was just coming from the top of my head. However, this is how you get it to the top of your head. By writing a script, by practicing it, by having those calls with some organizations that don't necessarily go so well and aren't going in the direction you want them to. But by the time that you get to the 5th call, the 10th call, the 20th call, you're going to be learning a little bit more what to say. You're going to be learning how to respond to certain questions in a slightly different manner. So yeah, that was, Indira, that was amazing. I mean, thank you very much. It's not easy to do that, actually. So
No.
I really appreciate that. So the next...
I think, sorry to interrupt.
No,
I think it is hard when you speak to someone face to face. I think it's a little bit easier with the phone.
Oh, I like that take.
Yeah, but because it doesn't feel very natural, to be honest. I mean, cold calling is not my expertise, but yeah, I think I do struggle when I try and speak to someone face to face. But I suppose with... Sorry?
Well, yeah, no, carry on, Indira, carry on.
Yeah, and so what would you recommend with this whole COVID thing? Because I noticed everyone prefers video conference, like video meetings, which I can't stand, to be honest. Is it better to always approach someone on a video meetup or just a phone?
I phone everybody. So I mean, I do all of my initial work phoning people. I do about 100 times more phone calls than I do video calls. And then I would video call someone if you're at a stage where you're kind of debating the presentation, what that opportunities could look like. If you're meeting one of their directors, if you're bringing one of your colleagues in on the call, there'll be a natural point. It'll be a natural point. So it depends what your objective is from the call. A lot of your objectives from the calls are probably just to book meetings, which would be a video meeting. So it does depend. Indira, I mean, thank you for putting your video on there. Just putting your video on in this.
Yeah, sorry, it's just my internet's not very good because I'm calling from the kitchen, so sometimes I do have to switch off.
That's fine. I understand. I mean,
quick question. Sorry, I don't want to hog.
That's fine.
Just a very quick question. So, have you been contacting companies throughout this sort of COVID period, and how has it been for you?
In all honesty, the types of partnerships I've been talking to people about are not that big. They're just kind of small conversations, little bits and bobs. So for example, I told you we get the gloves for free. So in terms of talking to the companies, I would definitely be aware of the COVID situation. However, most organizations are operating like normal. It depends what their services are. I would maybe be mindful of that. I guess you're not going to approach the restaurant trade at this point, unless you're the National Lobster Hatchery, of course. But no, yeah, it's definitely something to be mindful of. I would say operate like normal. I mean, for us at DSC, we've had to plan for a second wave next year. This is probably going to be the new normal. And I don't think there's any reason to stop what you're doing because of COVID. I think if anything, it makes it more pressing that you are, as a charity, getting on top of it and building up these longer relationships with companies that maybe have more funding to put in terms of, I think the companies have adapted to this change a lot better because they have a lot more money to provide the right technology and the right tools to the people. And so this is a good time to kind of get on board with that expertise and those resources they have.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, just putting your video on here, Indira, is a great way to normalize being on video. It's new to all of us. It really is. And it's almost a fake it till you make it. And that's kind of what I would suggest. I used to hate cold calling and now I love it because I've done so many hours of it now. And I know that I can bring expertise to it. And it's the same for training. I mean, I got nervous before this training. Of course, it's crazy because I love it and I know it, but everyone gets nervous doing things. And that's just one of the interesting things about life. Okay.
So what's interesting, last observation, you said that we should literally hound someone 15 to 20 times. But when you first said that, I was like, oh my God, you know, I would hate that because I get loads of sales calls myself. And then I think it was helpful that you said, you know, there are many different ways to tell someone about us. So using all our social media. So social media is quite important, really.
I mean, I've never picked up the phone to someone 15 to 20 times. I've looked to build that through other places. I'm aware that they need to know of my organization 15 to 20 times. The most times I've picked up the phone to someone's probably like, maybe it is 15 times, but over like 6 months or over a year. And you'll just know in your gut, you'll know if the conversation's going the right way. Once you've spoken to the decision maker, you'll know it pretty early on in that call if there's going to be any more ground there. You really will. It'll be pretty straightforward. All right, I'll move on just because I want to make sure we've got an actual call written down at the end point. So this bit gets a little bit more convoluted. So obviously these bits are going to be pretty straightforward. Are you responsible for charitable partnerships? How do you differentiate yourselves? What I'm looking for you to write here is maybe a problem you're solving. So this is an example of how we help organizations boost employee engagement by getting their staff to volunteer with us. However, what is the problem that you're going to solve for a corporate? Is there a problem you're going to solve for a corporate? And what would it say? What would you be saying? Is anybody really stumped by this? Bear in mind, I'm going to pick a random person to give me their problem that you're solving. All right, I'll give you prior warning then. Should we go for Christiane? Is that okay, Christiane? Would you be able to give us your problem you're solving in a few minutes?
Hold on a second.
Take your time, take your time. You get you right. I just thought I'd give you prior warning.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you, great, yes.
Yes. Okay, so what are you working at in the example from working with similar organizations? We know that you can. Okay.
Yeah.
So exactly what would you like me to do here? So
think of a project you deliver and think of a problem that you're solving for a company by working with them.
Okay. All right, then. Let me just see.
It might be that you're not. It might be you just straight up need a cash. You just need money from them. However,
okay.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at the problems that we're going to solve for companies.
Okay, that's fine. Let me just think about. Give me a couple minutes.
One of the greatest ones I've ever seen is a network provider up in the northeast of England who ran a couple of train stations. And they found they were getting a homelessness issue on their stations, and there were a lot of young girls actually that were sleeping rough at the train stations. And so what this train provider actually ended up doing is working with the local homelessness charity. So where these people were then found homelessness at the stations, they had a direct link to the charity who these girls were a beneficiary of. And then this organization ended up delivering training for the network provider. And so that's a relationship which didn't involve money, but they solved a really big problem for this train company by helping them deal with homelessness on their platforms.
Okay.
That's a great example, obviously. And if anybody gets one that good, then I'm going to write it down and preach it to everybody I hear because it's going to be brilliant.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if what I have in mind it is, but I'll just have a go.
Please, yeah.
I have to say something.
That's all you can do. Thanks.
Yes, most of it's just dealing with the mental health issue of everyone working, dealing with vulnerable people, and one of the main things that employers come across is like people are actually who are supposed to be supporting people are also getting sick.
Yeah.
So I'm here basically to I'm offering like some support like on your like early mornings before they start working on doing like a very short like mindfulness meditation for staff, because putting the well-being of staff in the center of in the beginning of their work, so they can manage their well-being, something like that.
Christiane, before amazing.
Yeah, because it's proven the results that we've been. So now I would have to find actually the figures, but it's like I know by experience that dealing, the coaches that I work with, they're working better with people are the ones who are actually better in themselves, are really in good well-being and mental health. Because so it's a way of actually having like self-assessment as well, so people can self-assess themselves by doing this daily practice. But if it's a short practice that is including their actually work, that can help both employers and
No,
employers, employees, and the outcome as well. Yeah, and the
I mean,
productivity. Yes.
I run my own freelance training company doing wellbeing training. And so I'm very much familiar with that conversation, actually, Christiane. And I think you're going to have love there, picking up the phone to someone and saying, look, we know that your staff, we know that people benefit from having a focus on wellbeing at the beginning of their day, because disengagement costs this amount. And when people start their day by opening Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, we know that that distracts them for the rest of the day. And so what we want to do is give your staff the opportunity to start the day with a wellbeing focus that they can carry on into their role.
Like, that's good.
That's really cool.
That's good. You phrased much better than I did, but that's fine. That's good.
You did amazing. And actually, your phrases will adapt and they'll grow over time. And of course, you'll end up saying what you say. The only reason I know what to say there, Christiane, is because I've said it on the phone so many times before. And so that really positive. Does anybody else want to share theirs? I'm looking for a volunteer, but if nobody does, that's absolutely fine. Fine.
I'll just something that is helpful that I've noticed that's been helpful to me. We tend to hear very similar objections. And what I've found to be helpful, and just as you said, George, like writing out a script, and the more you say it, the more it becomes second nature. But doing an objection section, sort of, so like, no, we don't deal with this. Okay, then what do you deal with? And so just sort of positioning, because it can get kind of flustered. I have found that I get flustered when people say no if I'm not prepared for the next sentence. So it helped me to recognize what the common objections are in my previous phone calls, and then from that figure out how I can best maneuver a follow-up question or a follow-up statement to keep the conversation moving forward. So that's just as an aside, something I found.
Did you build that, Jess? Was that your idea?
No, I worked for a consulting company, and that was one of the, no, I would love to claim it as mine, but no.
So this is, it's in the book Tipping Point. So Malcolm Gladwell, who he wrote in his book, The Tipping Point, he talks about a salesperson in America and and the organization, how it reached their tipping point. And he was trying to find out how this organization ended up doing so well at selling. And that was what he found out the answer was. They wrote an objections book. They wrote a list of every single objection you've ever had. And they gave that to all their staff. They trained all their sales staff on it. I think that's an amazing idea, Jessica. That sounds really, really intelligent way to have it. I've never got to that point. I would love to have written my objections down, and I maybe do kind of a little bit in my own head. But as a team at DSC, we haven't done that, and it would be something that we would benefit from greatly. So, I mean, if you're doing this on your own, of course, you're going to store those moments, those objections in your head. But there's a massive benefit to having that written up for your team as well, and getting feedback on that. Jessica, that sounds impressive. That's really cool that you've got that. That's really, really clever. Cool. So write your own pitch. Language to avoid. So this is a big one where, again, it's us Brits. We love our soft language. We love to say, oh, well, it would be great for us if, oh, well, let me know possibly, or hopefully, or we want to avoid this. There is no hopefully, there is no possibly, there is no it would be nice, it wouldn't be nice, because that gives them all the power. As soon as you say it would be nice, and it isn't maybe something that someone actually thinks about, but in their head, it switches the power position to them. And I hate using the word power when it comes to these conversations. But when we use words like it would be nice and looking forward to, it shows them that that's what we want. It tells them that that's what we want. And so they then know what we want directly. I would say be natural. Don't necessarily avoid saying that. So for example, last week I emailed Toby saying looking forward to training. However, I wouldn't have emailed him a month before the training was booked in saying looking forward to delivering this training. I wouldn't have said that, because that would have, it sounds silly because it was a slightly different sales conversation. But I would always avoid using language like this when you're at a position where you haven't kind of signed contracts or you haven't got it all confirmed in. Like, we would appreciate it. It's like, I don't know, it depends what you follow it up with, but it's like, if you say it would be nice if you were to offer this and that, well, you just ask for it. It's just, don't say it would be nice. Just say you want to, just ask for it. Be firm. People appreciate that firm language, even if they don't realize. There's something about saying it would be nice and looking forward to that it subtly makes you think that there's such a solid offering there. What do you think? Asking someone what they think is just, again, it's a tough one, because I've definitely said, what do you think in some moments, but as a rule of thumb, saying, what do you think, just allows them to sort of turn the conversation in any direction they want to go. If you've worked hard to get to a decision maker and you say, what do you think? They say, well, to be honest, it sounds like we would much rather be of a charity that does this, this, and this. You've kind of instantly closed the door for yourself. So just avoiding things like that, those four, especially in email. And don't say it will be nice. Don't say looking forward to. During negotiation, don't always hold your first stance. These are just some little wins. When you're negotiating with someone and they say, let's say you're asking for £15,000 for a project, and they say, well, what else would you take? Oh, we'll take £15,000. If you hold your first stance, and I mean, try this with your partners as well. I don't want to result in any, actually, maybe not. Maybe one thing I've learned is that the sales activity I've done in my life doesn't work on my girlfriend at all. She sees right through me. But always holding your first stance is a great first step for negotiation. And it shows that you thought about it. You're not just jumping in with a random figure that you're not sure if that's the right figure. That first thing you've asked for, you hold it. That just adds so much gravitas to what you've asked for, because you're going, well, you can negotiate all you want. That's what I want. That's what we need. Like, we've not got to this point randomly. So always hold your first stance and pursue win-win. And it can be quite hard to talk about win-win. What you don't want is, you don't want a situation where either the corporate or yourself is just going to be getting in there for one year and getting out the next year. You want to be looking for these long-term relationships. So I'll put a link to this. And in fact, you can just Google that. I'm not going to play it now because we're getting to the end. In fact, gosh, we're at the end. So this is a TED Talk. Honestly, I'd watch it. She's done 2. It's up to you. But she speaks about the questioning really well. And she's talking about getting money from major donors. But it's really valuable, the kind of way she asks questions and her ethos and how she approaches meetings. For Indira, for you, maybe, if you're thinking about going to meetings, there's some really good preparation there about how to go to meetings and the first things you want to talk about. Don't forget, today somebody has to ask somebody for money, and it's going to be you. One of those days it's going to be you. And so that, don't be shy, be proud. I mean, I feel so lucky that I volunteer for a garden that does amazing work for its beneficiaries, and I think that the companies that we partner with are lucky to be partnered with us. And that's what they feel like as well. And it's not anything bad for them. It wasn't a tough thing for them to decide. It wasn't an obligation. It's a brilliant thing they do. And it's something that probably gives their staff, some of them, a reason to be employed by that organization. I'm sure a lot of staff will be like, well, especially the Glovers, well, we give gloves to all these charities. Like, we support this as well. And so be thankful for the role you've got, actually. And it's quite exciting. It's tough. It's tough to deal with a lot of no's, but for every no that you get, there's going to be a yes. There is going to be a yes. And that yes might then pay back 5, 10, 20 years of love for your charity. And that's really important. So we're getting to the end. I'll leave these slides up here just for measuring impact. When you're communicating back to charities, you want to be looking to have 3 to 5 potential outcomes. You want to have smart targets. So, for example, one of our projects is supportive volunteering, where we have a volunteer that we then provide a little bit of additional income to, so they can be trained to do further garden therapy. So we talk about one of the potential outcomes, or how many beneficiaries were trained because of the funding you provided. What was the feedback that those beneficiaries gave us? How many beneficiaries have gone on to experience this supportive volunteering and be trained by the money? So they're the outcomes that we use, and we communicate back on those on a quarterly basis. So I'll leave these slides in for you to look at. Build good habits. Put the time in your calendar to do sales calls. Put it in the morning. Make it the first thing you do. Honestly, make it the first thing you do. If you don't make it the first thing you do, you won't do it. Do it 9 till 10. Do it 9 till 11. Just do it. It's pick up the phone, and you'll surprise yourself how many calls you get done. Make a note every single time you do a call. Put it in a call diary. Track your performance. Report on it. If you have a boss, I mean, I always say this to people. There's 3 things people do: what they want to do, what they're good at, and what they report on. I hate doing sales calls, and I'm good at them. I report on them every single Friday. I send an email to my boss telling her how many sales calls I've done. If it's 0, I have to explain that. as much as I'm holding myself to account by this, just the fact I'm showing somebody else my performance is holding me to account. And so report on it. It's that important. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, what does win-win look like? Corporate volunteers, which you mentioned, these are just some books that I use personally. They're the 7 habits. Of course, here's the takeaways from the beginning and your learning objectives.
And we'll see them. Hopefully everybody's up for kind of joining us.
Perfect. So we're at the end. Did anybody have any questions?
Great. It looks like we've got everyone. Yeah, that's everybody, I think. Oh, Laura's still left in the attendees. Oh.
I can't see who that is to meet them.
Oh, I can't wait that.
Oh, great. Laura's saying that.
I can't see who that is at all. Any questions from anybody?
I've got a question.
Please.
Have you ever used the technique of looking on local corporates' websites and seeing that they don't have a logo of a charity and use that as an opening line?
That's a brilliant idea. I've not done that. No, that's a great idea. Doodle in.
Yeah.
Definitely. That is a really positive in, actually. That's a really comfy, safe way to get involved. Definitely.
Okay, anyone else got any other questions for George?
Fine. Well, I'll just say, thank you for everyone I picked on. Thank you for everyone that contributed. Honestly, it's really well done. And I think for people that mentioned their sales talk, I'll come to you in a second, Shanji. Indira, Christiane, you did brilliantly. It's a really tough thing to open your microphone up to kind of talk about that. And so thank you so much for saying that. It's really great. And you both did brilliantly. It's really, really good. Go on,
thanks very much. Thanks very much, George.
Thank you, George.
It's all good. That's okay. Go on, Shanji. What were you going to say?
Thank you, George. Thank you.
No worries. There's one more question. I think if anyone's just hanging on, Shanji, what were you going to ask?
I just wanted to say we also have a disability community allotment, and we are looking for a partnership to work with some other organizations as well. Nice. So, that's what is our allotment work has been really successful projects we have, and but we are looking for more partnerships to work with now.
Good. Yeah, that's natural. You should be. Definitely pick up the phone, speak to organizations, to tell them what you're doing and see if any bite.
Okay, just before everyone goes, I'm just going to remind everyone I'll be sending around a survey link. It's a really quick survey about this session, just so we get some feedback. But please just take a couple of minutes to do it, because we need to measure it to make sure that we're providing the sort of training that you need. And of course, we have to report back to funders like Trust for London. They want to know what the training was about. They're paying for this. So we have to feedback to them. So if you can just give us your feedback, that helps us ensure we can get more training like this in the future.
It's good for me as well. I've been delivering digitally now for 6 months, but I'm learning every time. So, any feedback for me as well, please be honest. I'll definitely read it. I'm sure Toby, you'll give it to me, won't you? So I would love to hear about any thoughts you have about how it could be changed or anything additions to the session. So really appreciate the time, everybody.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very good, very good session.
Thanks.